The night my ATV disappeared started like any other quiet evening, but within minutes it turned into the kind of story that changes how you look at your neighbors forever. I never imagined that a single reckless decision by a spoiled Karen's daughter would pull police cars, accusations, and handcuffs into our peaceful street, but that's exactly what happened. I had parked my ATV in my driveway after a long weekend ride. It was my pride, my stress relief, and honestly my favorite way to escape the endless drama that ruled our neighborhood. Our president, a woman everyone secretly called Karen, acted like she owned the entire block. Rules changed depending on her mood, and somehow her daughter always got a free pass. That evening, I noticed laughter outside. A group of teenagers stood near the sidewalk, including Karen's daughter. She pointed toward my driveway, whispering something while her friends giggled. I didn't think much of it. I had dealt with enough nonsense to know ignoring drama usually made it disappear faster. Around midnight, I looked outside and froze. The driveway was empty. My ATV was gone. At first, I thought maybe someone had borrowed it, though nobody would dare without asking. My stomach dropped. I checked security cameras, my hands shaking as I fast-forwarded through the footage. And there she was, Karen's daughter, laughing, climbing onto my ATV like it was hers. Her friends cheering while she drove off into the dark. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I called the police immediately. While waiting, I walked outside, pacing. Lights came on in nearby houses. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Within minutes, a patrol car pulled up. I showed the officer the footage, expecting shock. Instead, the officer's face tightened like he already knew this wasn't going to be simple. "Do you know who that is?" he asked. "Oh, I know exactly who that is," I replied. Before the officer could respond, another car screeched to a stop nearby. Karen herself stepped out, furious, marching straight toward me as if I had done something wrong. "You called the police over a misunderstanding," she snapped. "My daughter doesn't steal, she just borrowed it, without permission, in the middle of the night." The officer calmly asked where the ATV was now. Karen crossed her arms, smiling confidently. "You're not going to arrest my daughter," she said. "You have no idea who we are." That sentence changed everything, because 15 minutes later, headlights appeared at the end of the street, and my stolen ATV came roaring back, with flashing police lights right behind it. The sound of my ATV engine echoed through the neighborhood, loud enough to pull more neighbors out onto their porches. Everyone watched as the headlights cut across the street, followed closely by flashing blue and red lights. My heart raced. Karen's confident expression slowly faded as the reality of the situation rolled straight toward us. Her daughter pulled into the street too fast, nearly losing control before slamming the brakes. The ATV skidded sideways, tires scraping against the pavement. 2 police cars boxed her in immediately. Officers stepped out calmly but firmly, their posture making it clear this wasn't just a warning conversation. Karen rushed forward, shouting before anyone even said a word. "She's just a kid. This is ridiculous. She's allowed to drive it." The officer beside me looked at her. "Ma'am, the vehicle was reported stolen." "It wasn't stolen," Karen snapped. "She borrowed it. We live here. We're part of the HOA." As if that somehow erased the law. Her daughter climbed off the ATV, laughing nervously at first, like she expected everything to end with a simple lecture. But when one officer asked for her license and registration, she froze. Her hands started shaking. Her friends who had followed behind in another car watched silently from the curb, suddenly very interested in their phones. I stepped closer to the officer handling the situation. "That's my ATV," I said calmly. "I never gave permission." The officer nodded and turned back to her. "Did you have permission from the owner to take this vehicle?" She hesitated, looked at her mother, then shrugged. Karen stepped between them. "This is harassment," she said loudly. "You don't understand who my husband is. We know the board. This is going too far." One officer exchanged a glance with another. They'd probably heard this kind of thing before, people believing connections protected them from consequences. The officer spoke clearly. "Ma'am, this is a criminal complaint, not an HOA matter." That line hit harder than anything else that night. Karen's daughter tried to argue. "It's not a big deal. I was going to bring it back." After midnight, The officer asked. Silence. The tension in the air thickened. Neighbors whispered softly. Phones appeared, recording everything. The same people who normally avoided WA drama were now watching it unfold like live television. Karen lowered her voice, leaning toward the officer. Can we handle this privately? She asked. No need to ruin a young girl's future. The officer shook his head. She took someone else's property without permission and drove it on public roads. The words felt heavy, real. Then came the moment that changed everything. The officer reached for a pair of handcuffs. Karen gasped. You can't do that. Her daughter's face drained of color as the metal clicked around her wrists. The sound echoed across the quiet street. For the first time that night, she looked scared, truly scared. And Karen, she looked shocked. Like she never believed consequences applied to her family. As the officers guided her daughter toward the patrol car, Karen turned toward me, eyes blazing. This isn't over, she whispered. I didn't answer, because I knew the real story was only beginning, and the neighborhood had no idea what was about to come next. The moment the patrol car door closed, the entire street fell into a heavy silence. The flashing lights painted everything in red and blue, reflecting off windows and frozen faces. Neighbors stood still, whispering to each other, trying to process what they had just witnessed. In all the years of living here, I had never seen anyone from the WA circle face real consequences, especially not Karen's family. Karen walked back and forth near the sidewalk, breathing hard, her hands shaking with rage. She kept dialing her phone, arguing loudly with someone on the other end. Every few seconds she glared at me like I had personally betrayed her. The officer handling my report approached me again, asking a few final questions while another officer loaded the ATV onto a tow trailer for evidence. You may need to give a statement tomorrow, he said calmly. This will likely move forward. I nodded, still trying to absorb everything. Part of me felt relieved. Another part knew this was far from over. As the police cars pulled away, Karen stormed toward me again. Her voice dropped low so only I could hear. You just made a huge mistake, she said. You could have handled this quietly. She stole my ATV, I replied. She's a teenager, Karen snapped. Kids make mistakes. Taking someone's vehicle without permission isn't a mistake, I said quietly. It's theft. Her face tightened. For a second, I thought she might yell again, but instead she turned sharply and walked back toward her house, slamming the door so hard the sound echoed down the street. I finally went inside, exhausted. But sleep didn't come easy. My phone buzzed constantly. Neighbors texting, asking what happened, sending blurry videos they had recorded. Some supported me, others hinted I'd gone too far calling the police. WA politics worked like that, people were afraid to take sides. The next morning, the neighborhood felt different. Curtains moved when I walked outside. Conversations stopped when I passed. Even the usual morning joggers slowed down as they reached my driveway, curious but cautious. Then my phone rang. It was an unknown number. When I answered, a cold, calm voice spoke. This is the WA Legal Committee. We need to discuss your recent actions. I almost laughed. My actions? Yes, the voice said. The situation last night created unnecessary conflict. We believe this could have been resolved internally. Internally. Like rules and board meetings somehow replaced actual law enforcement. Before I could respond, the caller added, you should consider withdrawing your complaint. It would be better for community harmony. I hung up. Minutes later, I noticed something strange. A white SUV parked across the street. Inside sat two people I recognized, WA board members, watching my house. That was when I realized this wasn't just about the ATV anymore. They were circling the wagons. By afternoon, rumors spread fast. Some said I overreacted. Others said Karen was already trying to fix things through her connections. But then a neighbor quietly stopped me near my mailbox and said something that made my stomach drop. Be careful, he whispered. They're planning something against you. And just like that, the real battle began. By the time evening came, the atmosphere in the neighborhood felt completely different. People who used to wave smiled less. Conversations stopped when I walked by. It was like an invisible line had been drawn, and everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. I didn't have to wait long. The next morning, I opened my front door and found a bright orange notice taped to it. HOA violation. Urgent action required. My heart sank. I pulled it off and read the accusations. Improper vehicle storage, excessive noise, driveway misuse, and even disrupting neighborhood harmony. It felt absurd. My ATV had been parked in the same spot for years without issue. This was retaliation. I took pictures immediately, documenting everything. I had learned long ago that dealing with the HOA meant keeping proof of every detail. Before I even got back inside, another email arrived, this one scheduling an emergency HOA hearing for later that week. Emergency? Over what? I laughed bitterly. Suddenly they moved faster than ever before, all because their president's daughter had been arrested. Later that day, I noticed Karen outside, talking with 2 board members. They kept glancing toward my house. When she saw me, she smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile that said she thought she had control again. That evening, one of my neighbors quietly knocked on my door. He looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder before speaking. "They're saying you embarrassed the community," he whispered. "Karen wants you fined. Maybe worse." "Worse?" I asked. He hesitated. "There's talk about forcing you to remove the ATV completely. Maybe even legal action." I thanked him, but inside I felt frustration building. They were trying to rewrite the narrative, turning me into the problem instead of focusing on what actually happened. The day of the HOA hearing arrived quickly. The meeting room was packed. Karen sat at the front with the board, looking completely composed, as if her daughter's spending a night in custody hadn't happened. She barely acknowledged me as I walked in. When the meeting started, the accusations came one after another. They said my ATV lowered property values. They claimed neighbors felt unsafe. They even suggested I had escalated the situation unnecessarily by involving law enforcement. I stood and spoke calmly. "Your daughter stole my property," I said directly to Karen. "That's why the police were involved." Murmurs spread through the room. Karen leaned forward. "My daughter is a good kid who made a minor mistake," she said smoothly. "But your actions have caused division." Division. I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. Then something unexpected happened. A voice from the back interrupted. It was one of the quieter neighbors, someone who rarely spoke at meetings. "She stole it," he said clearly. "We all saw the video." Another neighbor nodded. Then another. Suddenly, the room shifted. People began murmuring in support. The board members exchanged nervous looks. Karen's composure cracked for the first time. And then the door opened. 2 uniformed police officers stepped inside. The room fell silent. One officer looked straight at Karen and said, "We need to speak with you regarding an ongoing investigation." Karen's face turned pale, because apparently, the story was far from over. The moment the officers stepped into the HOA meeting room, all conversation stopped. The air felt heavy, like everyone forgot how to breathe at the same time. Karen's confident posture vanished instantly. Even the board members sitting beside her shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to notice the tension spreading through the room. One officer spoke calmly but firmly. "We need to ask a few questions regarding the ATV incident," he said. His voice echoed in the silence. Everyone watched Karen, waiting to see what she would do. She forced a smile. "Can this wait? We're in the middle of an HOA meeting." "No, ma'am," the officer replied. "This won't take long." The room erupted in whispers. Some people pulled out their phones again, sensing drama. Karen stood slowly, trying to hold on to her authority, but her hands trembled slightly. As she walked toward the officers, I noticed her avoiding eye contact with everyone. They stepped outside into the hallway, but the walls were thin. Bits of conversation drifted back inside. Interference with investigation, attempting to contact witnesses, encouraging false statements. My stomach tightened. She hadn't just defended her daughter, she'd tried to influence the case. The board members looked uneasy now. The hearing completely lost momentum. No one talked about fines anymore. Instead, neighbors exchanged confused looks, realizing this had become much bigger than an HOA dispute. After several minutes, Karen returned to the room. Her face was flushed with anger. She didn't sit down. Instead, she grabbed her bag and announced, "This meeting is over." But her voice lacked the authority it once had. One board member cleared his throat. "Actually, we should continue." That small sentence felt like a turning point. Karen glared at him, stunned that someone finally pushed back. Without another word, she stormed out, the door slamming behind her. The energy in the room changed immediately. It was like a spell had been broken. People started talking openly, things they'd been afraid to say before. Stories about unfair fines, selective rule enforcement, threats of legal letters over minor issues. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who had felt targeted. One neighbor stood up. "We need transparency," he said. Others nodded. The board members suddenly looked nervous. They realized the crowd was shifting away from them. After the meeting, several neighbors approached me quietly. One woman whispered, "Thank you for standing up. We've all been scared of them." I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted. Outside, I saw Karen near her car, arguing furiously on the phone. She spotted me watching and pointed angrily in my direction. Whatever control she thought she had was slipping fast. Later that night, I checked my messages and found something unexpected, an anonymous email containing screenshots. HOA discussions, private group chats, conversations that looked very questionable. One message made my pulse race. "Make sure he regrets calling the police." My hands tightened around the phone. This wasn't just about protecting her daughter anymore. This was about revenge. And if those screenshots were real, the HOA had crossed a line they couldn't come back from. I stared at the screenshots for a long time, reading each message again and again. The conversations were blunt, careless, and angry. Several HOA board members were clearly discussing ways to pressure me, fines, complaints, even attempts to turn neighbors against me. One line stood out more than anything: "If he backs down, the charges might disappear." My hands tightened around my phone. This wasn't just neighborhood gossip anymore. This felt organized. I saved everything immediately and forwarded the files to a secure folder. After everything that had happened, I wasn't taking chances. Then I did the only thing that made sense. I contacted the officer handling the ATV case. He agreed to meet the next morning. When I showed him the screenshots, his expression changed from polite interest to serious concern. He asked where I got them, but I honestly didn't know. The email was anonymous. He photographed everything and told me not to discuss it with anyone else. "Keep this quiet," he said. "If this is real, it could matter." The rest of the day felt tense. I noticed more people watching my house. A few HOA supporters seemed unusually friendly, asking casual questions about the case. It felt like fishing, like they were trying to figure out what I knew. That evening, I got another surprise. A knock at the door. When I opened it, Karen's daughter stood there. No attitude, no confidence, just nervous energy. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept. "I need to talk," she said quietly. I hesitated but stepped outside. She looked down at the ground. "My mom says this is all your fault," she muttered. "But I didn't mean for this to happen." I didn't say anything. "She told me everyone would protect me," she continued. "She said the HOA would make it go away." There it was, the truth slipping through. "Did she tell you to take the ATV?" I asked. Her silence was answer enough. She quickly added, "I thought it was just for fun. I didn't think it would turn into this." For a moment, she looked like a scared kid rather than the arrogant girl from that night. Before I could respond, a car horn blasted from the street. Karen sat in her SUV, glaring at us. Her daughter flinched. "I have to go," she said, rushing away. The interaction left me uneasy. Something about it felt desperate. That night, I barely slept. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again, another anonymous message. This one wasn't screenshots. It was a video file. I opened it, and my jaw dropped. The clip showed Karen speaking with board members outside a restaurant. The audio wasn't perfect, but the words were clear enough. "We'll pressure him until he drops it." I sat back, stunned. This wasn't rumor anymore. It was proof. The next morning, I delivered the video to the police. The officer watched it silently, then looked at me. "This changes things," he said. And that was when I realized the situation was about to explode in a way the HOA never expected. By the time the sun came up the next morning, something had shifted in the neighborhood. You could feel it without anyone saying a word. People who once avoided eye contact now nodded at me quietly. Others stopped to ask how I was doing. It was subtle, but the fear that had always surrounded the WA seemed to be cracking. Word traveled fast, faster than I expected. I hadn't shared the video with anyone except the police, but somehow rumors spread that authorities were looking deeper into the WA board. Neighbors started talking openly for the first time. Stories surfaced about unfair penalties, selective enforcement, and threats of legal action over tiny issues. The more people spoke, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about my ATV. It was about years of control. That afternoon, I noticed a small group gathered near the community mailbox. As I walked closer, conversations paused, then resumed, but this time they included me. One neighbor sighed. "We've all been afraid to speak up," she admitted. "Karen always had a way of making problems disappear." Another added, "Or making you regret complaining." I realized something important in that moment. People weren't just supporting me because of the ATV. They were finally seeing someone push back and survive. But the WA wasn't done fighting. Later that day, I received another email, this one official. A notice claiming I had violated WA policy by creating public disturbances and threatening potential legal review. The timing felt desperate, like they were trying to regain control before it slipped away completely. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded everything to the officer handling the case. That evening, things escalated again. 2 board members came to my house unannounced. They stood awkwardly at my door, smiles forced, pretending to be friendly. "We're hoping to resolve this peacefully," one said. "How?" I asked. "Well," the other replied carefully, "if you agreed to drop the charges, we could discuss removing the fines and closing this situation." So that was it. They wanted silence. "I didn't file charges," I said calmly. "The police did." Their faces tightened. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," one muttered. Before they could continue, my neighbor across the street walked outside and started recording with her phone. The board members immediately stepped back, suddenly less confident. "We'll talk later," they said quickly, leaving. As their car drove away, I noticed more neighbors watching from windows. The power balance was changing, and everyone could see it. That night, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was the officer. "We're executing a warrant tomorrow morning," he said. "You may want to stay home." I froze. "A warrant? For what?" He paused. "We'll explain later. Just be ready." I barely slept. The neighborhood felt quiet, almost too quiet, as if it was waiting for something. The next morning, I woke to flashing lights outside. Not at my house. At Karen's. Neighbors stepped outside in disbelief as officers walked toward her front door. Curtains moved, whispers spread, phones came out. And then, the door opened. Karen appeared, furious, shocked, as officers stepped inside. Whatever was happening now, it was bigger than anyone imagined. The flashing lights outside Karen's house felt unreal, like something you'd only see on the news, not on your own street. Neighbors stood frozen on sidewalks, whispering in disbelief as officers moved with quiet purpose. No one was laughing now. No one was smirking. This wasn't WA drama anymore. This was serious. 2 officers stood at her door while others walked toward the garage. Karen's voice echoed through the air, sharp, angry, demanding answers. But the officers remained calm, speaking in steady tones I couldn't fully hear from across the street. Then her husband stepped outside, confusion written all over his face. He looked nothing like the powerful figure Karen always hinted at when she dropped lines like, "You don't know who we are." Within minutes, more neighbors gathered. Phones recorded from every angle. The same people who once avoided WA conflict now watched openly. The power dynamic had flipped. One officer carried out a small evidence box. Another followed with documents. Whatever was inside had clearly been important. Karen tried to block the driveway at one point, gesturing wildly, but an officer firmly directed her aside. Her confidence was gone. In its place was panic. Then something unexpected happened. Her daughter stepped outside. She looked shaken. Nothing like the girl who had laughed while driving off on my ATV. She avoided eye contact with everyone. For a moment, she stood still, as if realizing how far things had spiraled. Across the street, a neighbor quietly said, "This isn't just about the ATV." And she was right. About 20 minutes later, officers escorted Karen toward a patrol car. Not aggressively, but clearly with purpose. She wasn't screaming anymore. She looked stunned. As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, the entire street went silent. The same sound that had echoed days earlier for her daughter now echoed for her. I didn't feel triumph. I felt something heavier, like the end of a long chapter that had controlled this neighborhood for years. An officer remained behind to speak with several board members who had arrived late. Their faces were pale. Whatever investigation had uncovered, it clearly involved more than just one person. Later that afternoon, the news spread officially. Interference with an investigation, attempts to intimidate witnesses, and misuse of HOA funds were all being examined. The HOA board quickly announced an emergency restructuring meeting. Suddenly, the people who once enforced rules without question were scrambling to protect themselves. As the police vehicles pulled away, neighbors slowly returned to their homes, quieter, thoughtful. The illusion of untouchable power had shattered. That evening, I stood in my driveway, looking at the empty street. My ATV sat safely inside the garage now. But something else had changed. For the first time since moving here, the neighborhood felt free. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that one final twist was still waiting. Because just before sunset, I received a message from an unknown number. "Meet me. You need to know the whole truth." My heart started racing again. The message sat on my phone screen for several minutes before I finally decided to go. Curiosity mixed with caution. After everything that had happened, I wasn't sure who I could trust anymore. The message included a location, the small park near the edge of the neighborhood. Public enough to feel safe, but quiet enough for a private conversation. When I arrived, someone was already waiting. Karen's daughter. She stood near a bench, hands in her pockets, looking nervous. The confidence she once carried was gone completely. When she saw me, she took a slow breath. "Thanks for coming," she said quietly. I stayed standing. "You said I needed to know the truth." She nodded. "My mom. She told me to take the ATV." I froze. "She said it would teach you a lesson," she continued, voice shaking. "She said you were making the wall look weak. I thought it was just a stupid prank. I didn't think police would get involved." The words hit harder than I expected. "She told me no one could touch us," she added. "That the board would protect us." Suddenly everything made sense. The confidence, the threats, the retaliation. This was never random. It had been planned arrogance. She didn't just control the wall, her daughter said. She controlled everyone. People were scared to say no. I sat down slowly, processing it all. "Why tell me now?" I asked. She looked down. "Because I'm tired of lying. And, because she's not protecting me anymore." Silence stretched between us. She continued softly, "The police already know some of it." I gave a statement. That explained the warrant, the investigation, the sudden collapse of power. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of wind moving through the trees filled the space between us. "I'm sorry," she finally said. "For everything." I believed her. Not because the words were perfect, but because she looked relieved to finally say them. When I got home, I realized how much had changed in just a few days. The neighborhood that once felt controlled by fear now felt lighter. People waved openly again. Conversations returned. The HOA announced new elections and promised transparency. My ATV was fixed and back in place, but it wasn't just about the vehicle anymore. It was about standing firm when someone thought they were untouchable. Days later, I watched from my window as a moving truck pulled up in front of Karen's house. Boxes were loaded quietly. No dramatic goodbye, no speeches, just a quiet exit from a neighborhood she once ruled. And as the truck drove away, I realized something simple but powerful. Sometimes the loudest power falls the fastest when the truth finally catches up. And that was the day the handcuffs didn't just stop a theft, they ended an entire era of fear on our street.
Welcome to Karen Universe, where we dive into every wild, quirky, and intriguing story out there. She thought HOA power made her untouchable until she stole my ATV and everything changed overnight. Police lights lit up the street as the truth came out and her confidence disappeared fast. In the end, the handcuffs clicked and the whole neighborhood watched her world fall apart. If you enjoyed the, don't forget to subscribe to Karen Universe, share with your friends and drop your thoughts in the comments.